Thanks for listening to Live Forever Young Radio. On the show today, we will be speaking with Lucy Forsting, author of The Adventures of Miss Twiggs and Company and the host of the Synergy Connection podcast. We explore her brand new book and discover a ton of lessons that can help people of all ages take a look at life with a new perspective. And I'm sure all of us wouldn't mind that. So sit back, relax, and get ready to live forever young.
Hi, I'm Bob Gilpatrick, and you are watching and listening to Live Forever Young Radio. I'm here with Raleigh Culp. Hello, Raleigh.
Hey guys, how's it going?
And our guest today is Lucy Forsting. Welcome, Lucy.
Thank you.
Hey,
Lucy. And
Hi.
Lucy and Raleigh, you've known each other for a few years.
A few years now, right?
And
We've worked together for a while.
the same, Lucy, I've known you for a number of years as well. And Lucy is the author of this amazing new book called The Adventures of Miss Twiggs and Company.
Yes.
And this is what it looks like. And Lucy's going to be telling us about this book. And Lucy, I hope also you might tell us about your partner who's the illustrator.
I will.
And made these beautiful types of illustrations. So, Lucy, you also are the host of Synergy Connection Radio.
That's
right. And how long have you been doing that for?
It's been about 2.5 years, but just since September, it is a podcast. So it is now up on Spotify, and it's on iHeartRadio, Google Radio, and Apple iTunes. So
Nice.
it's now an official podcast that is available to people.
Yeah, make
That's
sure
really
you check
great.
it out. It's on all those platforms.
Synergy Connection Radio. So what made you decide to start Synergy Connection Radio?
Well, as a podcast, I will, make a little correction here. It's just referred to as Synergy Connection and not Synergy Connection Radio anymore, because the podcast makes it a little bit different. And the Synergy Connection Radio started 2 years ago in September of 2020 because a gentleman who had Tampa Bay FM radio, he interviewed me and said, I would love to have you do an hour show for my radio station. And so I had done radio in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And it was back in the days when it was brick and mortar buildings and it was WGEE. And I, went there and they would do a countdown, an official countdown. And it was a question answer. People could call in.
Wow.
But it became, a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you're on. And we did an hour show. I also had done some, live television shows there because I owned Synergy Counseling Services. And people in Green Bay, like any place else in the world, they have issues that arise from just normal everyday life and things that are going on nationally and internationally. And as a result, there were a lot of people that would call in with questions like, how do I manage this? And I got to be the one that thought of the answer quickly.
That's great. And so tell us a little bit about Synergy Counseling Service. I understand you had 3 full-service clinics.
I did.
You actually went to college and university for counseling as well?
Yes, I have a master's degree in counseling, and my background actually started as a family therapist more than anything else. But working with children and working with adults, when I was in St. Louis, because that's where I got my master's degree, I worked for a children's home. And it was where parents would drop off their kids if they were no longer able to take care of them. And so it was a highly stressful, job. But I got to meet a lot of amazing people. And we did try reunification in cases where we could do that. But Monsanto Corporation funded a recidivism program that I started called the Thinker's Edge. And it was to help reduce recidivism with first-time offenders. So as a result of doing that, I got a little more national recognition. And then I moved to Green Bay from St. Louis. And I worked with a psychiatrist and a psychologist and a couple of other therapists. And we decided to start Synergy Counseling Services. Because of my basic personality, I guess, I'm very organized and have a tendency to be able to carry things through. So if I start something, it's going to get finished. They made me president of Synergy Counseling Services. So part of my day would be in the community, Chamber of Commerce events and things like that. Part of the day would be seeing highly professional individuals. So I did get to work with some of the Green Bay Packers, and they became friends after I worked with them. So I got to go to Super Bowl games.
Did you really?
I did.
What Super Bowl did you go to?
The one that we won, the last one that we won that I went to was with New Orleans.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh man, that was
And
good.
so in fact, I was commenting to somebody the other day that I went to the playoff game with San Francisco.
Okay.
And it was about 32 degrees. And so I had on 4 layers, and it couldn't decide whether it wanted to rain or sleet or snow, because it would just vary right around that 28, 29, 30. So it just depended. There was not a dry article of clothing on my entire body. And we went into the restroom, at when we could.
Yeah.
And I would wring out my gloves, and they had those little warmers in there. So I'd pull those out, wring them out, put them above the blow dryers just to warm up. And they weren't going to get dry, but just to warm up the inside of them. So now that the Packers are, my
going.
team,
Yeah, they're
they've
going.
got to buy this
13
coming
and 3,
week.
man.
No,
13.
11.
No.
13. Yeah,
They're
13 and 3. Yeah.
They're doing good.
So we don't know who.
That's because of your psychological help there.
You think?
That's
Maybe.
For sure.
Maybe.
That's exactly why. Are you kidding me?
Maybe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's
Anyway,
amazing
sorry,
how
go ahead.
many people that are, like professional athletes, and you know this because of your, is she your niece?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But so many of them can be perfect specimens, of human beings. I mean, athletically. But if in their heads, their brain is still, you're not good enough. What if you get injured? And they're living a fear-based emotion. And that's how I got into the picture, was they would come and see me, and we'd figure out, okay, what can you begin to do differently to change this up so that you're not sending yourself such negative messages, because that's how they would get injured.
Yeah. Yeah. And Lucy, also, you're a Reiki master. Can
Yes,
you
I
tell
am.
us about that a little bit?
Reiki Energy is unique. We all are nothing more than vibrational frequencies, and I know you understand that better than most people. But I have the ability, more so than most Reiki masters, to send energy into an animal or a person and create healing vibrational frequencies. So I've told this story on my own podcast, but my husband, who is now deceased, but about 7 years ago, he was in ICU, and his oxygen level was only 78%. And they told me he had an hour and a half to live. And so I do get messages from, I call them my angels or my guides, and they said, put your right hand on the top of his head, put your left hand on his heart. And I did that, and then I just get very quiet because I know I'm channeling energy. And it took 30 seconds was all to change his oxygen level from 78 to 98%.
Wow.
So the doctors ran down the ICU corridor, and they said, what are you doing? And I said, energy work. And they said, well, now we can take him to surgery. So he did live another 3.5 years.
Wow.
And
That's
that is what Reiki Energy is. But like I said, not everybody, it's just like all doctors. Not every doctor has the same capabilities. And I think I have just a unique skill for sending energy in and making a difference. And I've worked on Raleigh, so he knows.
Yeah, I've had headaches and shoulder aches, and it does. It sends it. I can feel it actually. You can feel the. You can feel it change.
It's like a tingling for most people.
You can feel it, and then it moved. My experience, the pain I had moved,
Yeah.
and then she chased it, and then it moved, and finally.
Yeah, it's very common.
It's it's funny. It's trying to get away from that.
Running energy.
It is.
Right.
Yeah. So, Lucy, now, speaking of your book, The Adventures of Miss Twiggs and Company,
Right.
what gave you the idea to write this book?
Well, actually, the book actually started about 35 years ago now. And it was based upon the fact that I was already seeing people, whether it was through the Thinker's Edge program or people that were coming into my office because I was brand new as a therapist, but I was beginning to see that they were living a life of limitations based upon their thoughts. And so, I just began writing a couple of ideas. And my son was actually Brian in the book. And so he, his description is exactly what my son looked like. But Nick at that time was beginning to ask questions about, like, what can I do to make my life better? Or how do I get to, play soccer? Or how do I get to make straight A's? Or something like that. He would just ask questions. And I thought, this all is based on thinking. So as we think, we create. And as we create, that is our life. So I didn't do a lot with it initially. I just had a lot of notes. But the title came about because I was visiting my parents in California. And I went into a store that was named Twiggs. And there was a mouse. And the mouse that was in there was this adorable handcrafted mouse. But, it was Christmas time, and I'd already spent a ton of money getting there and on gifts. So I told myself, no, you can't have that mouse. And I didn't buy it. But the owner of the shop, he said, if you come back the day after Christmas, everything will be 50% off. So I went back. The cupboard was bare. The shelves were simply bare. And yet I knew she was in the store. And again, this is just a unique skill maybe that I have. So I told him, I said, she's above my head. What do you have up there? And he looked at me and he went, well, he said, that's where we do our accounting and, billing and things like that. And I said, somehow she got put up there. Could you go and check? And he did. And he came down with her in 5 minutes. And he said, wow. I have no idea how she got up there.
Wow.
And I said, well, okay, now I have the title of a book that I'm working on. And he said, what's that? And I said, it's going to be called The Adventures of Miss Twiggs and Company. So I borrowed the name of his store from the fact that she was there.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
That's really cool.
Santa Monica, California. That's where my parents lived.
Awesome.
That's great.
Is it still there? Do we know or no?
I don't know. It was the most fascinating little store. It was like on a corner street of Montana Boulevard. So
there's magic in that store.
There definitely is magic in that store.
We have to look it up and see.
Yeah.
And when was this, Lucy? When did you start writing the book?
The actual book was probably in, I would say, 1987. So it's been a while ago. And then in 2013, I actually, I put it away. And part of the reason that I put it away is I had somebody who did channel information, and he's now deceased, but his name was Ron Scholastico, and Ron and I were friends, and he was in California. So I asked Ron, I said, is this a good time for my book to come out? And he channeled, and he said, nope. He said, you'll know when the right time is, but people aren't ready for it yet. And I literally boxed everything that I'd done, and I put it away. And I thought, okay, I need to focus on what I need to do right now. And as the ideas would appear, I would make a note and then put it in the box. But I didn't work on the book anymore. Mm-hmm. And then I started working on it in 2012, and it came out as an ebook in 2013. And everybody that read it as an ebook said, I want to hold it. I want to have it in my hand. I don't want to read it on a tablet. And so, it's very expensive, by the way, to create a book, especially one that's illustrated. And Mike Woodcock is the assistant director at Universal Studios. So that's why the artwork is so great.
Wow.
And so it was not an inexpensive proposition for me to bring it out as a book, and I had to wait a little bit. But the timing was right, and so here it is.
That's awesome.
And so now that it's out and published, so during the process of writing it, how did you change yourself during that writing process?
I would say that I didn't change my thinking, because my thoughts have always been that you create your reality. What I became more aware of is that all of us can jump down that rabbit hole of despair. And when we do, then we begin to create the very thing that we don't want. So I knew better. And I think that part changed for me is, recognizing how we can sabotage ourselves, even if we do know. So that part for me, the awareness level became greater, and I could see it happening every place I looked. So I didn't want to be like, oh, hey, you're doing this, don't do that anymore. But I learned to say, what do you think is causing? Because I was still a therapist. What do you think is causing this particular situation for you? And let them do the homework. Well, I don't know. Well, let's kind of look at that a little more closely. Could it be that? This is something that I hear you saying a lot. Could that be a part of what's causing this? And so the recognition for them began. And that's kind of how people have to learn is you don't learn by having somebody tell you something, or at least I don't think most people do. You learn by experience, by having to actually go through something and then go, aha, now I see.
Yeah, I agree. Well, real quick, on your method of creating the book, you said you basically had a box that you would collect your ideas up over the years. So I think the way that you would do that would almost make you put more thought into it when you finally pull it out. What was it, 20 years later after you start boxing it up? So you have a lot of time for those thoughts to marinate and make really good connections. And as you collect it, I've never heard of anybody writing a book that way. It's quite unique.
Well, actually, I have 4 in the works right now.
With little boxes?
Not with boxes anymore. Now I put them in file folders, and I'm also, I use the computer a lot now.
Right, yeah.
So I have...
So it's the same method, though.
It is the same method. And it
Interesting.
actually keeps them... the concepts very, very separate. I have one where I was at a local park, and it's a cypress tree, and there's a growth on the cypress tree. And in fact, I think I talked to Raleigh about this. But as I came around the corner and I saw the growth, I looked at it and I went, oh my gosh, that's Emmanuel. And the name was just like right there. And he's a Christmas dragon. And so all of the ideas that are coming through me now, when I see things and I think about things, I just shove them into that folder.
That's cool.
Because when I do have time, I'm not sure which book is going to be the next one.
Right.
But when I do have time, then I'll be able to go ahead and pull everything from that. Because what we basically do, and I think all writers do this, I don't think I'm unique, is I think we download. I think we gather the information and from life experiences, from things that we see, using our senses. And then when the time is right, you don't have to do a whole lot of research anymore. It's just all there, and it writes itself.
That's very interesting, and I agree.
Emmanuel the dragon. Have you seen the book called Emmanuel's Book?
I have not.
So actually, I think there's 2 or 3 of them, and it's channeled works.
Oh,
from
really?
A woman who's channeling a spirit guide named Emmanuel. It's really, really beautiful.
Oh, cool.
So keep that in mind. You might want to read Emmanuel's book.
Maybe,
along
because
with it.
he has to do 12. In mine, he has to do 12, like little miracles. And the reason he was placed on the tree is because he was very impish. He didn't listen. And so they decided that they needed to slow him down, and he would have to do these 12 little miracles. And when he's done them, then he'll be able to leave.
Wow.
That's great.
That's awesome.
And so, Lucy, in the book, The Adventures of Miss Twiggs, one of the characters is reading Don Quixote throughout the book. And you don't say anything about Don Quixote or Don Quixote's adventures during the writing, but similar to the Miracle Dragon, right? Don Quixote was kind of like that because he always had these fantasies in his mind that he was trying to live out during his created adventures, and he was pretending he was this chivalrous knight and the like, right? And so and even the word quixotic, right, came from Don Quixote, which is people that have almost like delusions of fancy dreams that are coming true, and it's almost like a negative word where it's categorizing somebody or characterizing someone as unrealistically fantasizing. right? But in your books, that fantasizing is encouraged in the sense that these positive fantasies and positive thoughts are what's actually creating your reality.
That's true.
So in a sense, you are saying it's okay to be like Don Quixote, and you're going to create your own reality with your mind. So it's the opposite of discouraging people from living out a life that is a creation of their own choosing.
Exactly. Because so many times, and I think it's well-meaning parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, friends, teachers, but, children have such sponge-like minds. And if you say something that is discouraging, quite often, I worked in the schools for a lot of years too, and if you say something that's discouraging to a child, they'll remember that more than they'll remember, the attagirl or attaboy. They dwell on what they've heard that maybe was, you're not living up to. I have a friend whose teachers said to him on a very regular basis, we're so disappointed in you.
Yeah.
And, meaning that, hey, you've got a reputation you can live up to that's much better than this. But, he was ADHD, he was all over the place. And so, they kind of were reminding him that you're not making my life easier. So I'm disappointed in you because you're not doing your best that makes my life a little bit better too. And those kinds of messages stay with you for a lifetime. So a lot of the people that have read this particular book, they're adults. And they come back and say, wow, I could see me in the book. And now I understand more of what I need to do today in order to not continue to live the life that I was living.
Yeah. And so some of the teachings in the book are coming at the beginning of the book. They're coming from the little mice, right? So Miss Twiggs is this very forward, brave little mouse, and she has two companions, one who's also really brave and the other one who's more shy. And at the beginning of the book, they are the characters that are teaching the lessons.
That's true.
And then as the book goes on, there are lessons being taught by a particular man that works at the train station. And then in turn, one of the young boys starts to take on the aura of being a teacher himself. And so, and this is set in 1945 while World War II is still going on.
Well, actually, the beginning of the book is it's like a preface, and that is in 1945 as the war is coming to a conclusion. And then, and you find out that Mr. Wagner, who was the station depot master, he was visited in 1945 after his wife was killed in a bombing in London. But the book itself, for the most part, is actually in 1946. And so the little village in Derbyshire County is called Mount Pleasant. And Mount Pleasant is picking itself up. There's...
After the war.
Right. There's, people's lives have been shattered, just like in any war. And so they're all trying to kind of get their life back on track again.
And so it's interesting at the end of 2020 here, and we're already in 2021, and we experienced in 2020 very challenging times, most people would say, with COVID and the lockdowns and so many people becoming unemployed.
Right.
And some people say this is the worst time since World War II.
I've heard that.
And so
I've heard that too, yeah.
part of the lessons in the book was, all right, even though part of it's during the war and then the recovery after the war, that people can still manage their own thoughts by focusing on happiness and joy as opposed to fear. And even in the midst of chaos, one can create this mini paradise of their own choosing within the chaos.
Right.
Is that essentially what Miss Twiggs is beginning to teach people?
I think to a major degree that's true, and what we've said, especially with COVID-19 and looking now into some of the things that are happening politically or health-wise, into 2021, is you can either dwell on what you can't change and just get frustrated and stressed, or you can say, all right, how can I make my life, a little bit better? And usually it's done by actually reaching out and making somebody else's life a little bit better. Changing the mindset, like turn off the news. If you're a person that's addicted to what has Trump said lately or how many people have died recently, yesterday or this morning from COVID, turn it off. Go out and hug a tree, pick up a paintbrush and paint. Read a positive, message in a book. For some people, it might be picking up their Bible and reading the Bible again. But find something that makes you want to get out of bed. Because I think right now an awful lot of people have stayed by themselves so much that, they've become almost like hermits.
Yeah.
And they're not focused anymore on life. They're focused on how do I stay safe, so they're fear-based living instead of living, and the radio show that you're doing now, this particular program is all about life, but it's not living in fear. It's how do we find a way to truly live life, for happiness and joy.
Yeah.
I agree. It really is. And that's an awesome thing to remember, especially with what's going on right now.
Yeah, they say in difficult times, keep your mind focused on the good things you're going to do for other people. And another one of the lessons that Miss Twiggs was teaching, and which they noticed in one of the boys that they were helping teach, that they noticed he was walking with his head held higher. And like he had a purpose. Right. And so I think that's what you were mentioning earlier. People have to have a purpose. So if you can get out and about to do things with a purpose, which the lessons from the book are basically that love is the power that drives everything, and that with that as your primary representational attribute, you can then have an attitude that's very positive that will then drive your thoughts. And then it's those thoughts that create your reality. Is that the sequence, kind of?
Yeah, I think so. If we are looking for affirmation and we are living a fear-based life, then we seem to find fear in almost everything. And then it's a confirmation, like, okay, the world really is falling apart. But if we switch it around and we say, you know what, it's a beautiful day. The breeze is amazing. Listen to the birds. I'm beginning to look at spring flowers. I want to get into the garden. Something that is productive and positive. Then we will begin to hear more of that.
It's true.
It happens magically.
You get what you focus on, whether you want it or not.
That's very true.
Yep.
That's very true. So be careful what you wish for.
Yes. Now, another lesson in the book that I remember was to make a picture in your head of your desired self and your desired life. Can you tell us about that, making a picture in your head? I guess you're making it in your mind.
You're making it in your mind, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a very visual person. You've been in my home. And so color, texture, ambiance in general, everything is, and I think part of that might be the artistic quality of a writer, or maybe somebody who paints, and I do both. And so for me, if I'm beginning to create what I want, I see it. I absolutely see it. I can hear it. I can touch it. I use all of my senses.
Yeah.
And as a result, if I'm creating in my mind, it's like I'm going to start with the background. What does my background look like? What colors are involved in the background? What things do I want to put into the scene? So if I'm creating a home or a new car or a perfect job or a relationship, I begin to see exactly what is there. And so you do want to be confident, I guess, that your visualization process is going down a road that is going to give you the desired outcome. Because if you have tentative thoughts about it, like, well, maybe, or I'm not so sure, then that gets cloudy. So you need to be very clear as to what it is you're trying to create and then go down that road.
And Miss Twiggs was also encouraging to actually feel what it's going to be like when you achieve this anticipated outcome.
Right.
And so the feeling of it, in addition to seeing the picture, it's how am I going to feel
afterwards,
being in this picture and manifesting this picture.
Right. I think the example where you're at in the book is for somebody who is a little nervous about taking a test. And so, if they were fearful they were going to get a C or a D or fail it, then they're probably going to go that direction because their anxiety will make them choose incorrect answers. But if you have the conviction that I really know this stuff, I'm going to ace this, and then you're looking at those same questions, your attitude is so different and you're going to naturally pick the correct answer. And then how do you feel about getting an A? Would be awesome. I'm really proud of myself.
Yeah. And Raleigh, we can probably put a link to school test prep.
Yes, we have a video that
We have a video that addresses that exact issue with the emotional freedom technique. And there's a character that was created that is a little boy named Johan that teaches EFT for
kiddos,
making sure you don't get nervous taking a test.
Right.
It's a little short cartoon, but it'll really help drive
it's
that
called
idea
schooltestprep.com. So, Lucy, in regard to this visualization, right, that you then are going to have feelings for, it was also encouraged to think about gratitude. Right. And so if you are experiencing feelings that are good feelings about this desired future that you've made a picture of, if you can focus on being grateful for its accomplishment in the field before it becomes accomplished in three-dimensional reality, you can think about each of those little aspects of it. So you were saying the texture, the color, and maybe even the sounds and different parts of it. And they say the longer you linger in gratitude for your anticipated future, the sooner it becomes materialized. And so that is, I think, really important as well. But I wanted to ask you this. At one point in the book, Miss Twiggs and Company present a crystal. Can you tell us about that part of the book?
Sure. Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of a longer background as far as crystals are concerned. I have crystals throughout my home. Every room has certain crystals in them because they send off vibrational frequencies. And so one of the things that crystals, the way I do this with the book is that you have a series within your body of 6 different chakras, and each chakra has a different color. So the root chakra at the base of the spine is red. Well, the color that Mr. Wagner received when the mice visit with him, his crystal that they leave with him to remind him of their visit and what he learned was blue. And that coordinates with the throat chakra. And so he always has it on his desk at the train station as a reminder that he needs to speak his truth and he needs to not be afraid of his emotions, because he was angry after she died and he hated everybody and he wasn't a very happy person. So with Brian, the mice are leaving him a yellow crystal, and the yellow crystal is for the solar plexus. And that is where you discover who you are. And Brian is beginning to search for who am I, what's important to me, what's my life all about. right now as an 11-year-old. And so the yellow one will help him understand the lessons that he's learning about creating the reality that he wants, because that is who he is. And if he creates the reality that is best for him, it'll be best for everybody. So that whole understanding of joy and happiness and purpose, that is actually what we are all about, is we're here just to experience that. And if we let other things in, then we're not doing what we're here for. I was mentioning to you before we started the show that Sanjay Gupta, who's a medical doctor and neurosurgeon, has just created a brand new book. And what he said in the book is that the brain itself, and we're talking about creation and the brain here, but that the brain itself, its sole purpose is to make you happy. And
joyful.
And joyful. And so a happy brain, is a healthy brain, is the comment that he makes.
Right.
And so at any age, we can grow brain cells. But if we begin thinking that the old adage of after 24, your brain is beginning to decline, if you buy that, then, by the time you're 60, you're already thinking, I'm old. And I think people that are in their 80s and 90s can have a wonderful, youthful exuberance about them. But they have to understand that it is created, by their thoughts. So how do you feel about who you are at any age?
Yeah. So some people will say that person's having a senior moment.
Yes.
Which implies that because they're old, they can't remember momentarily.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And to me, a senior moment would actually mean something very insightful. Something coming from years of experience that results in wisdom and confidence and purpose. And so a senior moment, we could all decide, is actually a really great thing.
A great
I actually
thing.
think that's a smart idea.
So on
Yeah.
Live Forever Young Radio, a senior moment has now been transformed into something good.
It's
Right.
a moment for reflection
Insight,
and insight.
experience, and loving kindness.
Well, I don't think there's a single guru out there in the world that is 20 that I know of.
Yeah, exactly.
Usually they're elderly, but everybody comes to them because they are wise.
Yeah. Now, Lucy, another part of the book talks about putting limits on yourself. So tell us about that.
Well, unfortunately, I do believe that we get these messages starting at an early age. And back when I would have been a child, girls kind of went into nursing or they went into teaching. There weren't a lot of us that, signed up for engineering. Some became doctors, some became veterinarians. But the majority, if you went off to college, you were majoring in careers that were identified with women more than they were anything else. And men studied things that were identified with men. Now it's blended, so I think we have taken the limitations off, if you will. And we've said whatever you can conceive that you want to do, you can have. If you can conceive it, you can have it. And so we have so many males and females that are venturing into areas that were not even maybe thought of in the past as a typical career for somebody. And they're inventive, they're fun. I think a lot of companies are developing fun atmospheres where the creativity can flow, and it doesn't have that mindset of limitations. This is your job and this is what you do for 8 hours. It's not that way anymore.
Right.
And where my son is out in Colorado, a lot of the .com,
Right.
companies, I mean,
Silicon Valley.
it's playful.
Right.
I mean, they go take a break and they might play a video game. They might play, something else, and they might be in little think tanks.
Hacky
But
sack.
yeah, it's just, it's something that breaks it up so that it's not 8 hours of the same old, same old. And so I do believe we're taking limitations off of our identities as to who we are, what we can be. I think we're taking limitations off of careers. Certainly COVID has taught all of us that we can work from home. We don't have to really be in brick and mortar buildings. And one of the big things that's happening, especially out in Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Denver, major metropolitan kind of areas like that, is these buildings are empty because everybody is working from home. So that's very expensive real estate, right? And they're thinking about how to use them better, maybe for homeless people, and because they're already in existence. And so you can change up a few things, and now you can get people off the street. You can begin to re-educate them, so let's think outside the box.
Yeah.
And that does take those limitations off.
Not only your limitations, but looking at things with a different perspective.
Yes. Yeah. It doesn't have to be used this way.
Right.
It can also be used several other ways.
Very good.
Now, Lucy, you also work with us at Boomers Forever Young
I do.
Nutrition Company.
I do.
And at Boomers Forever Young, our version of Limitless is to create nutrition products that slow people's rate of aging and allow them to be much healthier for many, many more years.
Sure.
And so there's research that shows that people who are positive thinkers versus negative thinkers live about 7.5 years longer. The people thinking positive live 7.5 years longer.
That's a long time.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Thoughts.
And then also we are now seeing from results, actual results you can see in people's biomarkers, that they can also live a lot healthier, a lot longer by reducing their C-reactive protein, increasing their vitamin D levels. And a lot of this really came forward during COVID, when the research was showing that you really had to get your vitamin D level up, your vitamin C level up. You need to keep your inflammation down.
Right.
And so that's what you help people with during the day when you're not writing. You actually, a few days a week, get to help people. And this is continuing your helping career, because it feels to me like you've been doing this ever since you went off to college.
I did.
And now, because you're probably only about 10 years away from middle age, that you get to still continue doing this by counseling people and helping people with their health.
Right. And it's kind of, I like to use the word reinventing, because you can have a career, which I did, but I still see people, in terms of some counseling that I do. I still do Reiki. I write. And so each one of these areas is like reinventing me a little bit, that I don't.
It's like you've been collecting everything up in a little box.
Yes.
Like you have for your books.
Right.
And now you're unleashing them all at the same time.
Exactly. And
Sorry to interrupt you, but that's where I keep going back to the boxes.
Right.
So,
right.
Lucy, also, have you been asked about having The Adventures of Miss Twiggs and Company being made into a movie?
I have.
Good. And you have that. Are you going to be doing that anytime soon?
Well, it's being considered. Let's just put it that way. So I don't. Yeah. So I don't know. I think a lot of it depends right now. COVID has shut down doors left and right. So one of the fun things that I am looking forward to, that I mentioned to you, is we have a Marjorie Rawlings State Park that's up by Gainesville. And Marjorie Rawlings won a Pulitzer Prize for The Yearling many years ago. And she's an amazing writer. She had a lot of wonderful friends that were authors that visited her at her home. And so it was donated to the state of Florida and became a state park. Wow. And so it's a very fun place to go and visit. But the docents and the rangers up there were in touch with me, and they said they wanted to have me come up as the only children's author that has ever been invited to come to the state park. So hopefully COVID shut it down in 2020 for me to go, because
That's great, though.
but maybe in 2021 we'll have enough of the herd immunity, or whatever they want to call it,
so.
and we'll be able to do that. But yeah, I don't know, I just think that reinventing who we are at any given age. I had a friend who was a mentor, and when I met her, she was already about 84, and she was the first female attorney for the state of Wisconsin. And when she met me, she asked me in our conversation what my discipline was, and I had never heard that. I was like, okay, my discipline. I'm not sure what that means. And it was my degree, because she knew that I, had a degree, I guess, just by talking to me. But I didn't know what that really meant. And she was so instrumental in my life for almost 15 years. She died close to 100, but she was brilliant, and she never stopped learning. And so I think that taught me something, is that, you never want to hang it up. You never want to say, okay, what am I looking forward to today? Okay, what's on television, or where can I go for the early bird special? That is not going to be life. Right. Life is going to be about, what do I want to learn today, and what do I want to experience today? And who can I meet with where I can either be of benefit to them, or they might be of benefit to me?
That's really awesome.
That is.
And so, Lucy, as we finish up here, is there going to be a sequel
Yes.
to Miss Twiggs?
Miss Twiggs goes to Hollywood, right?
No.
So, could you give us? Are we allowed to have a little sneak peek into what she's going to do next with her buddies?
What is going to happen? Okay, so Derby from Derbyshire, is a cat, and that was actually my cat. He was a 22-pound Maine Coon. And so he is Mr. Wagner's cat. And at the very end of the book, Brian, who's the 11-year-old boy, has discovered that animals can talk if you learn how to listen. And he has now learned how to listen, and he has experienced that with Zachariah, who is now his pet bunny. So he has somebody to communicate with at home. And his parents don't know that he and Zachariah talk to each other in human language. But as he leaves the train station going to school on the last chapter of the book, he has placed Miss Twiggs and Mortimer and Penelope in the grass, and they're going to be catching the train back to their home in Weardale. And as he passes Derby asks him, "Are you going to be back after school?" And of course it's like what? You actually talk to me? And so he's now realizing that he'll be able to communicate. So one of the things that I will share with you is a deer is one of my totem animals, okay? And I was in Georgia, and we had wild deer that came to the cabin that we were staying in. And so while the very first morning that we were there, I had apples with me that I had brought up. And so we cut the apples when the deer appeared. And we took the corn out. But I took out some of the apples, and this one female doe, and she's probably about 100 pounds, she locked eyes with me. And I do know that I communicate with animals. And so she started walking very slowly towards me, and as she walked, she would lower her head. She never took her eyes off of me, but she bowed, and then take another step, and then she would bow until she reached my hand, and she took the apple out of my hand. And so I think that there's so much that we can learn about plants and about animals and about life in general. And so the next book that's coming out has Derby carrying the mice. So whereas they would have been enemies in this book because Derby looked at him and was kind of like, ooh, you look like you might be delicious. Mm-hmm. Now they will be able to work with him, and he will become part of the vehicle for transporting them. So it's not always going to be in a boxcar that they have to, climb up a rope to get to.
Wow. And
the little girl that's in the next book, her name is Isabella, and Isabella has asthma. And back in the 1940s, 50s, asthma was pretty serious. It still is, but we have better ways of managing it. Right. Back then, it was to keep them quiet. And so her life was very limited, and we were talking about limitations before. And so the mice and Derby, teach about taking limits off. Limits with friendships, limits with ideas about who we are and what we are, and so that she can live a life that has many more dimensions than what she currently believes.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. And she's actually Stardust masquerading, right? Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
As a little girl, as our Miss Twiggs and her friends.
Right.
They're Stardust masquerading as animals, and they have the sense that they actually were created from the same loving God force that created the whole cosmos, and that spark is in them, and therefore they don't feel any limits. They just jump on the train and go on grand adventures, and go back home, and without any worries about if people think they're crazy. They just go ahead and give their advice.
And, does
that sound like somebody you know, Rawlings?
That sounds like somebody that may be in the room.
Well,
it's a good thing to teach people. That's something that you shouldn't have to teach people, but sometimes because of our society and the things we're taught and the things we buy into, we don't know what it's like until you let go of the limits and you change that perspective.
Right. And that's when you get a chance to reinvent who you are.
Yep.
So you can rewrite that old script that was keeping you tied down, and release it and just say, you know what? Awesome. I can be anyone that I want to be.
That's awesome.
That's great, Lucy. Do you think maybe in the third book you write, maybe Miss Twiggs could teach the emotional freedom technique to children?
Oh, well, that's certainly a possibility.
Yeah.
Certainly.
And Lucy, lastly, can you describe to us this library you were telling me about earlier that's up at Crystal River?
Oh,
now,
sure.
Like, what's the size of this, and is it indoors, outdoors?
It's outdoors. It's outdoors.
So tell us that story.
Okay, so about 4 or 5 months ago, I had seen some very cleverly done, they're called little libraries, and they're all over, actually, Florida. They're all over the world. What happened was I woke up from sleep, and in the forefront of my mind was Crystal Beach is a northern Pinellas County park. It's a little community, but this park is there, and it has been magical in my life. There have been things there that have happened that should never have happened, including 3 manatees that came in, and we took pictures of that would just blow anybody's mind, because these manatees should not have been where they were. And we've talked to people about it, and they've said that's impossible, and we've got the pictures. So waking up, I heard the message that we were to donate a little library to Crystal Beach. And so that's, what I talked to my friend, and I said, do you want to build it? And he said, I could build it, or we could buy it on Etsy. Well, there had been 2 little girls that read the book, and I knew their dad. He's a retired police officer from Tampa, and I knew that he was also doing woodworking. And so the next message I got was talk to him. So I sent him a text, and I said, could you meet us over at the park? And I explained the concept. Right. He said, let me build it, because he teaches his daughters that every Christmas, it's not just about receiving, it's about giving. And this would be an opportunity for them to learn how to be stewards of something, but also to help create it, not go buy it. And so they had them sand and paint and do all kinds of things. So we dedicated it on December the 26th. And it's now registered worldwide as a little library, so that people that are traveling from foreign countries, sometimes they like to look for them, and so it's like a little scavenger hunt. Right. But it's a beautiful piece of work. It really is. And awesome. People are using it like crazy. And so one of our challenges is keeping it stocked, because there was a lady the other day that walked away with 6 books. And the concept is more bring one, take one. Yeah. But hopefully she'll read them and bring them back.
Maybe she brought 6 and took 6.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. But, if somebody wants to do a project that, to me, it encourages literacy for it, certainly. But it's all ages. We have children's books, and we have motivational books, and we have inspirational books. So I'm donating a lot of my own personal books there, including The Adventures of Miss Twiggs.
So someone might find the Adventures of Miss Twiggs and Company at the Crystal Beach Library. Now that's in...
It's not the Crystal Beach Library. It's the Crystal Beach Little
Library.
And it's in the park.
And it's outside in the park. And this is in northern Pinellas County over towards the Gulf of Mexico.
That's true. It's Crystal Beach is a unincorporated community, but it's very close to Palm Harbor. So
In
if people
Ozona?
know, yes, and it's close to Ozona. So if you were going north of Ozona and, still in Palm Harbor, but you're on the water. So they
That's where it
actually,
is. Okay.
and they could just look up Crystal Beach and they'll get the latitude and the longitude. I had to put that in for
Great.
the world
I'm
definition
I'm
of
going
it.
to look for it. I was in Ozona yesterday
Okay.
for dinner when I came back from playing golf.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to look for it next time I go up there.
And one of the things that I do want to mention to people as far as finding the book, it's on Amazon. It has 5 stars. But one of the things to look for, too, is just going to www.misstwiggs.com. So it's MISSTWIGGS.com. And there is a link on that website that takes them directly to Amazon, and it makes it so much easier if they want to order the book.
Absolutely.
Great. And are there things on that website that are in addition to the book, or is it just a place to buy the book?
No, actually, there is a lot of information on the website. One of the cool stories, and talk about channeling, but I think one of the cool stories is when I was doing some background work after the book was written, and I was working on the preface because people said, well, how did the mice ever decide to do this? I found out that the church that I had the mice born in is called St. John's, and there is a St. John's church in Weardale, England. But what was cool, because I knew there'd be St. John's churches. I mean, that's a pretty common name. But what was really cool is that there was a man who carved every single pew in that church, and he put a mouse on every single pew.
Yep.
No way.
And I had no way of knowing
I've
that.
seen the pictures.
Yes.
She showed me the pictures.
yeah.
Wow.
It's on the
So,
website.
It is.
What's the website again?
It's www.miss Twiggs TWIGGS.com.
And you can see those pictures.
And you can see the pictures,
It's awesome.
yes.
It's awesome.
So his concept was that he was as poor as a church mouse. And so that was his identifying logo, if you will, back in the
church mouse.
Right.
Cool.
And so that those pews are still there, and so the mice really did get born underneath those
That's
pews.
awesome. That's great.
Raleigh, did you have any more questions or comments before we
Wanted to
close
say
up for
thank
the
you.
day?
I enjoyed
you're welcome.
it. I enjoyed listening to it. I've known some of the background, but listening to it this way is nice, and hearing you talk about the lessons and the things being taught in it is great. So I appreciate you sharing that. I really am.
Oh, you're very welcome. If just one person reads the book and learns something to do differently, maybe that's holding them back right now.
Right.
But by reading the book, they go, you know what? I can change that little part. And now my life will be different. And that's all it takes.
And you're never too old to get started.
No.
Never. No.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Well, Lucy, thank you. I really enjoyed our talk today. Thanks
thank
for
you.
coming
Thanks
on
for having me.
to Live Forever Young Radio.
Thank you.
And we'll look forward to having you back again sometime.
Thank you.
And I'll also look forward to your next article for the Boomers Forever Young newsletter
That's right.
on aging with grace and vigor. And a lot of the articles that have been written for that newsletter were written by you too.
Yes.
So we'll be talking to you soon. And thank you again.
Thanks
Thanks
you.
everybody for joining us on Live
Have an
Forever Young
awesome
Radio.
2021.
There you go.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for listening to Live Forever Young Radio. Check us out at liveforeveryoungradio.com.